parenting youth through digital storytelling. And to start, I just want to recognize the many partnerships that made this project possible. So the 19 amazing filmmakers who took part, my co-PI and partner in all things, Dr. Megan Harrison from CHIO, community partners from the Yuval Center, Jenny and Bev, other study team members, Dr. Michelle Ward and Giselle Castillo, and funding from Women's College Hospital. So we've heard a bit of my bio, but just to situate how I got here. So this year marks 20 years as a registered nurse for me, starting out in pediatric surgery, adolescent surgery, and neonatal intensive care. And really throughout that time, I had this building desire to make change and kind of not knowing beyond the bedside how to do that or where to go. And so I decided to do a Bachelor of Nursing, a Master's of Nursing, and then I started getting exposed to more community-based work. I worked in harm reduction, in needle exchange, and with underserved groups. And during my master's, I fell in love with qualitative research, as one does, and sort of worked my way through research and found my way to being a methodologist. And that was around the time where I decided to pursue a PhD. So my PhD work, entitled Maternity and Meaning Making, was working with pregnant and parenting youth who were experiencing homelessness and living in a temporary urban maternity shelter. And in that process, I spent months at the shelter and really invested in the research process and relationship building. And it was such an immense honor and privilege and truly, truly life-changing. And at the same time, I started feeling this bit of uncomfort building inside of me that I was, investing of myself, and women were as well. And I was collecting their stories and experiences and then kind of going away and analyzing them. And in the end, rendering them even largely inaccessible back to the youth who had shared them in the beginning. And so throughout this process, I realized also, while I was working with these women, how much video meant to them. It was a huge driver in their learning about pregnancy, maternity, delivery, and they were consuming massive amounts of video from everything from watching a baby elephant deliver. They were trying to extrapolate any learning they could from video. And so I thought, if I really want to commit to amplifying youth stories, maybe video is something that I need to start considering. And so, much to the chagrin of my thesis committee and people at my work, I took a break from my PhD to go to the Documentary Film Institute to learn how to filmmake. And it was like Bambi on ice, me opening a tripod for the first time, because although I had nursing skills, I definitely had no film skills. But I came back and ended up conducting the study that I'm presenting today. And since then, as mentioned, I've completed a postdoc at CAMH with the incredible Alison Crawford, and I'm now a project scientist. And I just want to say that it's an honor to be here to share some of the stories of the strong women who have been such an inspiration to me all the way through. And here's what you talk about. Sometimes someone says something that just strikes you. And I remember early on, even before I started doing my PhD, I was working on a research study with young moms. And one of them said to me, "No one throws us baby showers, but we're the ones who actually need them." And it sort of was like, I carry that with me, that sentiment of which births do we celebrate? Which lives do we celebrate? Where do we provide support? What are our lenses? And so it's something I've carried through in all the research I do. So for today, we're gonna hit on the basics, talk about the study, the methods, some of the findings and the implications. And to give you a little bit of background about pregnant and parenting youth. So the literature is very clear that adolescent parents and their children have unique health needs. And there's been a lot of research done linking adolescent parenting with a lot of adverse outcomes for both the teen moms as well as their children. And a lot of correlational studies have shown higher rates of mental disorders, domestic violence, and other concerns in the context of lower self-esteem, lower socioeconomic status, lower income, lower educational attainment, and having lacking social support. And so lots of correlational research, but more recently, we're seeing a shift away from looking at maternal age as the cause for some of these negative outcomes, and really starting to consider the impacts of social determinants of health, which is no surprise to anyone working in healthcare. And it really is, I think, a heartening shift, even in terms of how literature is being framed now. Now, what this means for healthcare interactions, well, this is a very special group because they're accessing healthcare twofold, for themselves, as well as the gatekeeper for the health of their children. So building strong, trusting relationships with healthcare providers is critical for ongoing positive youth engagement in healthcare. And something that the young moms are very, very aware of are the negative stereotypes about young moms and pregnant teens. And I think that something that definitely didn't help was this gestalt of teen mom reality television that came out of MTV in the 90s. You know, they had Teen Mom 2, 16 and pregnant. And the young moms are very aware of that, but also feel that their healthcare providers aren't immune. And what this means is that sometimes they perceived judgmental attitudes, which contributed to a sense of mistrust and fear. And in some case, fear of judgment led to delaying or hesitance with accessing care for their children, which is something we absolutely want to avoid. We want everyone to be able to access care when they need it. And so work that we had done in the past, we did 2 studies leading up to this one called Treat Me But Don't Judge Me, and the other one called But We're Not Like the People on TV, led us to realize that young moms want to be seen as individuals rather than characterizations or broad generalizations, and that their healthcare experiences are complex. And so our research methods have to be complex and nuanced as well. So then we were left with knowing our clinical experiences, but what do we do? How do we amplify the perspectives of and experiences and stories of these youth? You know, is it research? Is it art? Is it advocacy? Is it community engagement? We came to learn that it was all of the above, all of those things. So we partnered with a community organization and went on a very participatory journey funded by the Women's College Hospital with the following objectives. So we were looking to engage youth and support the articulation of their thoughts, feelings, and experiences through digital storytelling, to examine their digital health narratives, and to explore how they perceive the digital storytelling process. And to start, just a little bit of background to touch on about what is digital storytelling. You might be wondering what this is. So it's a short first-person narrative film of experience. So basically, throughout a digital storytelling workshop, you're guided through the process of moving from a lived experience to a story, to a script, and to a film. And they can be anywhere from 1 minute to 5 minutes. They tend to be on the short side. And they feature voice, music, images, video, and with young moms, a lot of memes. That was a big one for this group. And digital storytelling was really popularized. We sort of saw it coming out of in the 90s, out of the US with Story Center, and it's just continued to grow. And so we see it being used as a collaborative arts-based qualitative research method that features a flattening of the participant researcher hierarchy. So really looking at more of a co-creation as a culturally competent practice, as well as one that's well suited for underrepresented groups. And so we worked with the Youthville Center to design this study. So again, very community-based, very participatory right from the beginning. And this center is a not-for-profit charity that serves youth age 14 to 25 in a way that is trauma-informed and holistic. And beyond being, their main focus is on high school attainment, but beyond that, they offer crisis intervention and mental health and counseling and attachment-based parenting programs, daycare, food programs. They bring in a dentist once a month. They bring in a gynecologist. So really, they try to offer as many specialized services to these young women as possible. And so we worked with them, and we ended up hosting a set of 2 workshops, one in the summer, one in the fall. There were 2 days in length with young moms with a really high facilitator participant ratio, with a clinical counselor present for all of the sessions, with daycare and meals provided. We were able to map the workshop to their school curriculum, so they got an English credit for the work. They received mini iPads and honoraria for taking part. And looking at who took part, so we had 19 women take part. 2 of them were pregnant. One of them was very pregnant. And 17 of them were parenting at least 1 child. They were aged between 16 and 20. All of them disclosed having a past or current mental health condition. 17 of them listed social assistance as their primary source of financial support. 18 of them were housed, and 1 of them was living in a shelter. And describing our process very quickly, this is a bit complex as a slide. So really the idea was that we talked about telling a story about health defined most broadly. So beyond physical health or mental health, to include any aspect of health they wanted to share. Then participating in story circles, pair sharing and discussions, brainstorming, moving into writing and editing, recording narrations, sequencing images, editing and polishing, and then culminating in a group screening. So the youth within the workshop screen their stories together. And then we talked about broader sharing. And so our study received REB from the Children's Hospital, and we modified a typical digital storytelling curriculum to include some special considerations for this group. So wellness planning was discussed. We had check-ins and check-outs. We made sure the didactics were kept very, very brief. We used progressive skill building, and we gave lots of options for pair shares, peer support, independent work, feedback sessions. The other thing that makes this special is that we were able, because it was a participatory study, to have some funds reserved for knowledge sharing, kind of left open. And we worked with the youth to help brainstorm how they wanted their stories shared, if they wanted their stories shared. And we let them think big as much as we could, and we tried to leverage the tables we were at in order to make those things happen. And so I'll touch a little bit on how their stories were disseminated. So first, we used targeted sharing through relevant organizations, community presentations, and academic presentations, but we also did more. So one of our youth said, you know what, I never see on TV. I want to see someone on TV talking about young moms over breakfast. I want to just squash that, make it the most normal thing to be considering over breakfast. And so we went on breakfast television. Jenny, Alvy, and I went on breakfast television. 15 of them were okay with the sharing of their stories online, with the caveat that many of them didn't want their stories shared on YouTube because YouTube was considered a space for like social interaction for them, but they were okay with them being shared on a Vimeo channel. So again, a reminder that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to the internet, right? It is a space where they may have special considerations about where things are shared. Another thing that we did was that we really took community engagement seriously. We hosted we did many outreach presentations, but one of the most special ones was that some of the women wanted to see their stories on a big screen. And so we thought, okay, let's figure out how we're gonna do this. If this is something they really want, and there are enough of them, let's see what we can do. So we became poster designers and like poster tapers on poles and circulating advertisements, and we booked a cinema and we booked a bus to bring them there. And we screened on a big screen 18 of the stories. So 18 of the women were okay with their stories being screened. And we asked them, who do you want to see in the audience? What does that audience look like for you? What does meaningful sharing mean? And so we identified various groups, so policymakers, academics, community members, their friends and family. Interestingly, bus drivers. So the young women felt a lot of tension from bus drivers in OC Transpo. And so they felt that maybe this was stemming from them not understanding some of the lived realities of being a young mom that travels by transit largely. And so we reached out to OC Transpo and invited the bus drivers and healthcare providers. And after our screening on the big screen, we hosted a discussion panel. So 5 of the young storytellers took part in the panel. And now you are going to experience a bit of this as well. I don't know if you knew that you were signing up for a matinee double feature, potentially triple feature, depending on how much time we have. But I think the best way to explain digital storytelling is to see it. So we're going to take a look at two, maybe three of the stories, and all of the storytellers have given permission for this. So just 1 second, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Okay. And we're going to start with one entitled "You Are Not Alone" by Alvy Katab. Did people hear sound? Could someone give me a thumbs up? Oh, actually, before we dive in,
is living.
I should just say, one of the things that makes digital storytelling so engaging is the invitation to enter into someone's life experience. And so I just want to give and sometimes that can bring up some strong feelings as the viewer of these stories. And so just to give you notice that the stories that I'm sharing today are going to touch on themes of mental health. One of them touches on themes of domestic violence, as well as past trauma. And so if you feel that those may be heavy for you today, feel free to step away, and you can join back up for the end of the presentation and still understand the findings without having seen the videos. So I just want to give you that option, and let you know that there are some sensitive topics that will be shared. So sorry about that. I'm going to rewind.
This thing is living in my body that fights to survive with a mind that tries to die. It feels like all the emotions have been sucked out of your body and that sadness was left behind to consume you. Sadness is the only thing you see, feel, and do. This is depression. Usually, there's no meaning nor reason behind being sad. You just feel sad with no explanation, no matter what you do. It feels like the weight of the world is laying on you. You feel numb most of the time and find that life feels as if it's in slow motion. Simple tasks become painful. You're stuck in your own world and in your uncontrolled thoughts. When it comes to seeing your friends and family, you slowly start lying and put on your mask and wear your best fake smile. You choose to be alone in your comfort zone, where no one asks questions. You lay in bed all day, staring at blank space for hours, trying to run away from your thoughts, but it never leads anywhere. You're just stuck. You tell yourself it's like a headache, that it will pass, that it's just another bad day. You feel as if no one understands you. You wanted to talk, scream, yell, and shout about but all you could do is whisper, "I'm fine." They do say you can't help someone if they don't want to help themselves, but what helped me get through depression slowly was when I went on vacation to see my family across the world in the Philippines. I didn't want them to see me the way I was, so I decided I will live life and I will fight my fears. I wrote them one by one and fought to get through them. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And with the help of all of my family and close friends, slowly made me feel myself again. The emptiness I felt was filling up with love and finally made me see that there's more to life and that I can fight anything that comes my way.
Chantalle, you're muted.
I don't know that I've gotten through a day without mastering the mute button yet, a year in. So just saying that Alvi's motivation for that story was to share what depression felt like for her, as well as the path that she found to help support her wellness. And she's one of the few that really took on this role of director and like cast people in her story, which I hadn't seen before. and did a ton of post-production with special effects and music and layering, and really embraced this as her directorial debut. And it's funny because initially she didn't even want to do the workshop, but she heard that we were catering lunch. So that's what got her in the door. And then by the end of it, she decided she couldn't decide if she wanted to be a nurse or a filmmaker. So really it was a transformative experience for her. And I told her to do both, of course. They're going to share a second one.
I had a rough start in life. I was abused at home, and running away from that abuse, I ran into even worse abuse with my past relationship. I mistook what I thought was love for control, and I ended up in a bad situation. I was abused, beaten, and sexually mistreated. This domestic relationship had me in and out of the hospital and gave me lots of mental health issues, like anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. My personal health became an issue. Multiple visits to CHIO, and in general, I dropped out of school. I didn't know what else to do. I got into conflicts with the law, and then I thought something had to change. Then I got pregnant when I was 17. And to be honest, pregnancy saved my life. The day of my child's birth started as the happiest day of my life. CAS kind of ruined that day for me when they told me I couldn't leave the hospital with my baby. Because I smoked marijuana before pregnancy, and I have mental health problems. But after they escorted me home, they found no problems. They're convinced I'll be a bad parent, even though I'm trying my hardest to go to school. I have my own home, and my child is doing so well at home and daycare, and has never had any problems other than an ear infection. CAS has never really been a help, and haven't done much but stress me out. No one gets excited to hear about CAS. I worry about losing my baby. My past is not my weakness, it's my strength. I'm grateful, I am happy, and I am optimistic because of everything that has happened to me. Not everyone would see that as a positive thing, but I have learned positive lessons from it. And that has made me the positive person I am today. No matter how much I've been through, no matter where I am, it is what it is, and I know where I am going. Like I said before, my past is not my weakness. It is my strength.
Okay, and I think we have a moment to go into our third story, which is brought to us by Taylor.
Before I had my son, anxiety and PTSD had taken over my life. I went through traumatizing events that made me afraid of the world. School was no longer happening, ever. I couldn't get on a bus, be in a public place, or go to any fun events with my friends. Fast forward a few years, I found out I was pregnant with my son, Kason. I knew I had to get my high school diploma and build a life of success for him. A friend of mine who also had a baby was attending a school for young moms, but I couldn't build up the courage to go. It felt like every few weeks she would message me the things she was doing, working towards her diploma. I wanted to be there accomplishing these things, but still, nothing. Until one day, she switched to Uville and told me how much she had accomplished in just a few months and to call right away because there was a wait list. By this time, my son was 6 months. I called, and I started attending that September. I took the bus to school every day and talked to the girls every day, something I could never do before. Having my son has made me face fears I'd never thought I'd overcome, and Uville has become my happy place.
All right. So, well, we can talk about the stories really during the discussion point if you have comments or questions. But really recognizing, like, I don't know if you feel it, but how engaging the format is to create this shared emotional connection to a topic and inviting people to engage in a story and to take action as a result, that people often feel like they're moved to do something after seeing these stories. And so in terms of our preliminary findings, so looking at themes that came out of the 19 stories that were created, the vast majority had themes of resilience, change, and the capacity to overcome obstacles, which we've seen in all of the stories we watched today. Motherhood as a source of strength and hope, again, which was a dominant theme in the ones we saw. More than half touched on mental health. That was a very, very big area of focus for these young women. Healthcare engagement. So again, we saw in Shui's story that CAS and being in the hospital and what that was like for her. And 5 of them talked about past abuse and trauma. And while each of these stories are unique, there are some common themes, although they look very, very different in each of the stories. Now, when we talked about key messages, so in our focus group discussion after the workshop was finished and after everyone had screened the stories from their workshops, we asked the women to reflect on key messages in their stories, why they were sharing these stories, and why the timing was right to share them now. And the following 4 themes emerged. So they really were interested in challenging stigma and dominant views when it came to young parenthood and looking at normalizing parenthood and working to balance some of the representation, as well as highlighting the strengths of young parenthood. Really keen on, again, challenging views related to mental health. So sharing that message that mental health needs to be taken seriously and that treatments can be effective. So that came out in a lot of them, that there was a way out of some of these things, that they worked. And one of the girls said, you know, I used to think that these sayings were cheesy, you know, and they are cheesy, but they do work. And so trying to get that message across. Equally, that they're not defined by their mental illnesses or mental health challenges. There's more to them as a person. They also wanted to share that message. And there really was a shared sense the timing is right in order to discuss some of these, what they felt were difficult topics more openly, and the timing was right to tackle some things that maybe a few years ago would have been considered more taboo. So they were very keen to create these stories to raise awareness, as well as to role model for their peers. So because they are at a school where teen motherhood is very, very, very normalized, they recognize that not everyone is in the same situation. So that these videos could act as a potential role model to support someone else who's going through something similar, but doesn't have access to the same services. Now, in the process of transitioning from a lived experience to a written script was really thought of as a proud and meaningful moment for many of them. They also openly shared positive feedback and praise for others in the group, including feeling proud of their individual journeys, as well as having completed the workshop together. So just a couple of quotes here. I feel like a workshop like this changes your views on everyone around you. Like even someone who looks nice, it doesn't mean that their life has been nice. Everybody has a story. Like you never know what someone's going through or been through. So it makes you consider like the deeper parts of people's stories and lives that you may not see on a daily basis. Another said, we are all going to school together every day and look at each other. And honestly, I don't know where we all come from. We've all been on this planet for multiple years and we've all been through different things, good and bad. Like when we all come together, I mean, we go to school together and like, I can look at so-and-so and know that you have a beautiful smile, but I don't know what's behind that. So when I got to know what's behind that, like that's a connection, and I want you to know me. Another one said, creating this video helped me put the past behind me and look towards the future. Now, the workshops helped some realize that they're not alone in their experiences and that everyone brings diverse and unique experiences with them. That said, they felt mixed feelings about the sharing of their stories after the workshop. So some surfaced tensions related to sharing their stories, feeling really proud, but also realizing that there could be repercussions or harms from sharing. And so here, the first quote says, okay, I'm so proud of all the girls because I know what PTSD feels like, having to remember certain parts of your life. And they kind of go through it and try to remember it vividly so that you can explain it to someone else. So it can be really, really hard and it takes a lot, and I respect that. We all came together and we all did it. So this sense of really group cohesion and this shared accomplishment was a very, very strong feeling after the group screening. And the spectrum of how people would share their stories afterwards was very, very vast. So one of the girls put it on the internet and it kind of went soft viral and had like 1,000 views in less than a week. Some of them shared them only with their really close loved ones, and some of them didn't share them at all. And so we saw a great variety, even though they all felt very proud of what they created, some of them felt tensions. And here's a quote from one. I like to advocate, and this seems like good for that. I want to do something, put it on YouTube or Facebook, but then I was like, holy shit. Like if my family sees this, they might disown me. And then I just kind of froze up. Like I really want to do something for a good cause, but I feel really not supported in some forms. I don't know. So again, a conversation we have all the way through about thinking through your story and how your story is shared. Now, feedback from the group screening was very interesting. So a pediatrician said, how fantastic to see that despite the hardship that they've suffered, their focus is not on hate or revenge, but rather on the love that they have for their babies. They did not talk in terms of anger or blame. Instead, they spoke of caring and dedication. How powerful. They are heroes. And I don't know that any of them had been described as a hero by a healthcare provider before this. But again, it opened up that other side of understanding about their lives. A policy maker said, these messages are so powerful. I was stunned at how positive and empowering all the young women are, even when telling such dark and difficult stories. I am blown away. And I don't know that anyone has ever been blown away by my research in any other context. So again, speaking to how combining technology with the voices of this underserved and highly stigmatized group can be incredibly powerful. And a filmmaker on the panel said she felt like weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Now, it's not all like roses. There are definitely a lot of situated ethical issues in participatory digital methods, some of which we've touched on lightly, but again, there can be unclear boundaries about, where does this fall? Is this public health? Is this community engagement? Is it research? Is it advocacy? And it's really important to make sure that everybody is on board about the goals, objectives, outputs, and ownership. Consent to participate and indirectly participate was a big one with this group. So if you're sharing images of your children or your families or partners, where does consent stop? Is it just with the individual? Is it other people who are depicted? So we had a lot of conversations about that. Tensions between process and product. So really we tried to focus on storyteller well-being and autonomy, but there is a process of like editing down a story and like making, there's like a filmmaking process as well as a lived experience. So being really sensitive to that, the potential for harm. So that again was ongoing dialogue, the limits of confidentiality and being unnamed versus being anonymous. So where are the limits if you're appearing in a film? As well as power to disseminate. So negotiating where the stories are shared, for what purposes, and that gets revisited on an ongoing basis. And we had a really, really detailed form that specified exactly where they were comfortable or not. And we made sure we respected those boundaries, and we still do. Now, final takeaways. Digital storytelling created an opportunity for self-reflection and empathy building. It added a very personal lens to young motherhood that otherwise is kind of missing. It aligns well with trauma-informed approaches, and it has reached beyond traditional academic channels. And interestingly, given the chance to talk about health, more than a quarter of them wanted to talk about abuse and trauma. And although it's known that survivors of trauma rarely spontaneously disclose their trauma experiences, we found that many of the youth in the study chose to focus on what may be considered sensitive topics or topics related to trauma. So given their experiences to share their thoughts about health in the most broad way, they chose to highlight their mental health and experiences of trauma on their own terms. Our chosen research method of digital storytelling aligns with some of the key principles of trauma-informed research, and maybe this is why these trauma narratives sort of emerged, including things like peer support, voice, and choice. And the young women in the study reported feeling empowered by sharing these stories through digital storytelling. And the process allowed them to take charge and take control of their own stories with active peer support. One of the other interesting things is that 79% shared that parenting in pregnancy was a source of strength, allowing them to overcome obstacles and enhance resilience. And prior research has shown that mothers find great importance in being a role model for their children, and that pregnancy and parenting can provide them with the strength to make, quote unquote, better choices or different choices. And this may represent a crucial time for healthcare engagement for this population and involvement in both young parents and their children. And it's an opportunity for healthcare providers to recognize their patients' strengths and resilience and the positive effects of their journeys, while collaborating with young parents in making informed decisions. And so really a key time to be building understandings that can be crucial for lifelong health. And that's it for me.